Welcome back to another video, and we're going to be continuing on our chat about Adalo and what it can do. Now, particularly in this lesson, I want to cover databases. I want to talk about how you can use the database in Adalo, how you can use relationships, how you can turn that into a repeating data list, and then how you can kind of link data between pages and use variables as well. So we've got a lot to cover. Let's crack on. Now, the most important part here is our database menu over here. So immediately there's a couple of options that you have with Adalo. You can use either Adalo's built-in database collections, which is just the Adalo phrase for a database table, or you can connect to an external collection. And what Adalo mean by that is just any type of external database. So for example, you could host all of your data on Airtable here, and instead of hosting it in Adalo, you could keep it all there. You can manipulate it on Airtable, you can connect Airtable to other things, and ultimately Adalo will just pull data from there. You can also do a combination of both. So I could have a bunch of data which is specific to my app, which I use Adalo's database collections for. And then simultaneously, I could have an external collection that's going to let me bring in, let's say, some sort of external market data or something like that. So it's really, really flexible. In terms of how the interface looks, so Adalo by default is always going to create a user's collection. You can go in, you can view and edit the records, so we can immediately see when I signed up to my own Adalo app in the previous lesson, I can immediately see my email, the name that I put in, etc. And if anyone else was to sign up here, that would pop up as well. You can import stuff, download it, etc. And you can also just manually add data, which is pretty handy, especially when you're building out your app and trying to figure out how it works. We then have the different fields that are available in database collection or a database table. Adalo specifically calls these properties. If I click them, I've then got all the usual suspects. We've got text, number, true, false, Boolean values. We've got date and time. So these are all the different things we can save. And then we can create a relationship. Now, whenever I mouse over that, it's going to bring up a list of all the different collections I've got. At the minute, I've only got users, and therefore in the users table, I can only create a relationship with other people or other users in that table. So we'll play around a little bit. Let's say we're going to create a to-do list, for example. So we'll call this to-dos. And let's also say each to-do fits into a list, and each list is owned by a different person. So if I've got my app, then I've got my to-do list. Similarly, if you've logged into the app, then you've got your own to-do list. So we'll have lists as well. Let's call it to-do lists. I'm just going to put a hyphen between it. You don't have to do that, but I've done it. So what do we need in a to-do? Well, I can add my property, and I can say, well, you need to know what the task is. So that's probably the name. And you can change that, so you can say task. So we've got the task. We're going to have a date that the task is due, and we're going to have a true and false question that says, is task complete? So I can save all these different kind of variables. I'm not going to try and turn this into a whole kind of how to make a to-do app lesson. We do have one of them actually on Adalo, but just to kind of give you a few examples. And then the main thing that I'm going to do in my to-do list is I'm going to say who owns the to-do list. So I'm going to create a relationship with users. Now, if you've been through the fundamentals, hopefully you have, then you're going to immediately recognise this screen. This is my favourite famous Adalo screen that tells you essentially how to think about different relationships. So whenever you create a relationship in a Adalo database, it's going to pop this screen up, and it's going to give you three options that will help you figure out, do you need a one-to-many relationship, or do you need a many-to-many? Now there's three options, because obviously, as you can see from the first two options, a one-to-many relationship has two directions. There's two pieces of data in the relationship, or two tables, and which one is the one and which one is the many. Quite confusing until you actually read it out loud. So let's think about it. So we said previously, in this app, we're going to have a list of to-dos. Each of those to-dos will be on a list, and then that list will belong to a user. So let's read these out and see what makes sense. Well, a user can have multiple to-do lists. Yep, that sounds right. A to-do list belongs to one user. That sounds right as well. In theory, you could have a to-do list that has multiple people assigned to it if you wanted to get complex, but we're not going to do that. If we look at the other statements, a user can only have one to-do list. Well, I don't think that's true because you might have multiple lists. A to-do list can have multiple users. I don't think that's true either. And then a to-do list can have multiple users, a user can have multiple to-do lists. Well, that's not the one for us. Now, depending on what you're building, when you do use Adalo, those might be a great fit for you. But for me, I'm going to pick this one and hit done. So I've got my user, I'm going to change that to the owner. And then I'm going to add one more property, which is, of course, the list of to-dos. So which to-dos are on this list? So a to-do can only have one to-do list because our task can only be in one list at a time. But a to-do list can obviously have multiple tasks on it at once. So we'll just hit done. And again, that's just connect that to tasks. I kind of wish I'd called that collection tasks in the first place. Maybe I will actually. Instead of to-dos, I might just call it tasks. I'm not sure why that's not popping up. There we go. There we go. That's better. So we've got tasks, we've got to-do list, and we've got the users. So that just gives you an idea of how you can add various different pieces of data. And what I can do is I can go in and just kind of create a couple of lists to get it started. So I could say, let's call this list 1, doesn't really need a name. I'm going to say the owner's Niall at NoCode.Tech. He's a good guy, I've heard. We'll hit save, we'll hit done, and then if we go into our tasks, we can create a few tasks here. So task 1, film excuse me, on Adalo Basics. When's the due date for that? Well, today is the 28th of March, so let's say it is due today. Is the task complete? Well, that's going to be false by default because the task can't be complete yet because I've not completed it because you're watching the video. So let's hit save. We'll hit add another task. We'll add 3 here. Let's say edit the Adalo video. I don't actually do a huge amount of editing, which means I often stop and start videos. But hopefully that's going to change in the near future as I get better at it. And then we'll do another one, which is create databases on Adalo, which is just another random activity. And let's say this one's due for the 31st of March. Give ourselves a wee bit of time there. We'll put that in list 1 as well. I'm going to create one more, which will just be film another Adalo video, because there's one due after this as well, where we're going to talk about actions, workflows, and how all of that stuff works as well. So we've got our tasks here, those are all in there. We've got a user who owns that, our database is good to go. And again, if somebody else was to sign up, they would have another user, and then what we'll do is we'll add some functionality where they'll be able to add a task. So let's do a couple of things. Let's first of all look at repeating data list, and I'm going to delete this little button that I've been in the last lesson. I don't need that. So you have a few options in Adalo. Now, first of all, Adalo calls a repeating data list just quite simply a list. Nice and simple. You've got tons of different ways that those lists can be displayed. So we could have a simple list, a card list, an avatar list, image list, so on and so forth. I'm just going to go with a simple list. I'm going to drag that on over here. And you can see those little guardrails coming up just to help me decide where to put it. Now I'm going to just delete that search page as well, because that is going to get in my way. So delete that. So we've got this list here, and if I zoom into that, at the minute there's just a placeholder. You've got a title, subtitle for each item on the list. On the left here, I can now configure this list, so it can say what is this a list of, and it's going to bring up my various different database tables. So for me, this is a to-do list, so it's going to be a list of tasks. And I can immediately put filters, etc. on that, because right now this is just pulling a list of every task in the database. What we actually want to show here is all of the tasks which are assigned to the person who owns the task list. So what I can do here is when I go to filter, I can filter it by a few things. You can always select the logged in user. You can also select tasks, but one of the ones that I've got here is I can filter it by the logged in user, basically by all the tasks that are on a to-do list of the logged in user. So that's a little bit complex, so let's explain that. So this is going to filter by the logged in users, to-do list tasks. So what's actually happening here is this user has a relationship with this to-do list. So Adalo knows that this is the user's to-do list, in this case me. And then that to-do list has a relationship with these tasks, which means Adalo now knows that I can specifically pick all of the tasks which are owned by that to-do list, and that to-do list is owned by the logged in user. Now the logged in user is going to be me when I log in, but if you were to log into this app, then the logged in user would be you. Logged in user is almost a variable that always just refers to the person who is logged in at the minute. Now, if you've got, obviously if you're going to have several people, you could, if you're building a nice big app, you're going to have several 100,000 people using your app at once. But it's just talking about who is the person using the app in this particular instance. 1,000 people might be using it at once. They are all the logged in user, and Adalo will recognise that those are all individual people. So that's just how that works. So we can set that up. You can do all sorts of things like sorting them. You can put a limit on items. I'll probably just put a limit of 3. You don't have to do that, but you can. A bunch of advanced options, like if you add a new item to the list, do you want it to automatically refresh and update? Various different things. Now, one of the interesting things is, if I scroll down here, where I see title. Now, first of all, what that refers to, so this is a simple list, and these are each of the elements within the list. So we've got a title, which is where it said task on the right. We've got a subtitle, which at the minute says nothing. We've got the left section, which is where we've got this little circle. Adalo calls that an avatar. You can make it an icon, for example. Probably leave it as an avatar, just so it looks kind of good. And then you can switch various different things on. So I can add on a right section, and I could have in there, let's say we've got a little checkbox, because this is obviously going to be a list of tasks, so we want to know what's kind of completed and what isn't. Have I got a little box? Toggle box, maybe? Box? Let me see if I've got one. I'm sure there's an icon for this. Well, yeah, there we go. Let's go for that one there. So immediately what you can see on the right hand side is that's going to put a little box up and down there. Now, I'm almost certain there's a different word I'm looking for to get the right icon, but that will do for now. And you can change the colour of that, obviously, so I can make it like orange, for example, make it stand out a little bit. But this is just how Adalo tends to work. Every component is made up of multiple components, and you can then chop and change the details of some of those components. Now, let's take a little bit of a look at this, for example. We have this concept called magic text, and magic text is essentially the ability to put a variable in into a piece of text on Adalo. So immediately I have all these different ones available. Now Adalo knows for each item on that list there is data that corresponds to it. So we've got 3 tasks showing up in that list, and every individual task has its own record of data, and Adalo will let me pull out the specific details. So on the subtitle I could put the due date. So I could say the due date, and I can write in front of that, I can say due, and then I can do that date. And I can also configure that. So I can say, there's a bunch of different date options here. It can be relative, it can be the date in a proper date format, you can do the day of the week, you can do day of the week short, all sorts of different things. I'm going to put the proper date format. And then in the task, Adalo's already put this in for me, but it's just saying, let me just delete it and do it again. It's just saying, what is the current task? Well, there's a task there as I wrote it up and down. So let's just preview that. I want to show you how that looks. So you can see the placeholder there. If I go ahead and preview it, it should log me in straight away because I've already signed up. And there you can immediately see all of the tasks that are assigned to my user. Now clearly I limited this at 3, there is more than that, but you can now see the detail, you can see how it's coming up due, and then it's automatically putting in that variable date. So these were all just variables, and we've now told Adalo what to do with those variables. Now you'll notice nothing happens if I click that, and that's fine, we'll worry about that a little bit later on. But one of the things that's quite interesting that you can actually do is you can pull data through from your list into another screen. So I kind of talked about this in the previous video, and it probably didn't make a lot of sense then, but let me show you what I mean. So if we go back to this idea of click actions, Adalo is going to let me do something whenever an individual item on this list is clicked. So whenever something's clicked, it's going to take an action. Now that could be, there's all sorts of options here. That could be creating something, updating, etc. But we're going to go for a link. I'm going to hit new screen, and we're just going to call this one, for example, details. So let's say I wanted to get the details of a specific item on that list. I can hit create screen, and it's going to link it over. Now this bit is where it is important. What this is going to do is send the data to the details screen, because this details screen is going to be one screen for every single task, and what we want is for that details screen to know which task I'm talking about. So rather than, make some sort of infinite screen for every task that could ever exist ever, what you do is you simply tell Adalo when you click to that screen, take the data with you. So whatever task I've picked, take it with me. Now let me show you through the beautiful medium of variables how that works. So if I say put a bit of text here, and then we'll use our magic text. So we're going to say current task, and you'll see that's immediately available. So I can put current task, and then I can also say it is due. I'll put the due date, and again I'm going to configure that just like we did last time. Oh, sorry, over here. I'm going to change that to be, we'll put the day of the week this time. We'll say what day of the week it is due. So I'll do that. Now it's not kind of showing up too nicely, but that's not a massive problem at the minute. So if I now go in and preview this, and I click film another Adalo video, I always call it Adalo, then immediately you'll see the variable is coming up as expected, so it's showing up the proper task. I click the top one, let me click the bottom one, edit the Adalo video, and it shows up. So what's happening is Adalo is pulling the data from here through to here, and it means I can continue to use those details on the next screen. And that is essentially how you would start, having a repeating data list, and then having specific unique pages for each item in the repeating data list. And you could have a million tasks in there, and you'll be able to, every individual page will have this specific detail shown because of the variables. And that really is the power of repeating data, especially in Adalo, where, with one screen, I can now push all that data around, I can show it all over here, and actually for every single task that a user is ever going to make, I've now made a page for it. So that is really, really cool. And it essentially forms the basis of what Adalo can do. You can do all sorts of other things, like for example, what we've just specified there is a click action for the whole of the list. But what we'll do in the next video is we'll talk about how you can put click actions on specific parts of the list. You can take actions or workflows off the back of that. So join me in the next video, and I'm going to show you that in practice.